I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Mrs. Healy, can you please call the roll?
Mrs. Avanzato?
Here.
Mr. Blasbog?
Here.
Mrs. Clarkin?
Here.
Mr. Jones?
Here.
Mrs. McGoffin?
Here.
Mrs. Held?
Here.
Kaya? Here. Thank you.
Mrs. Healy, can you please recite the calendar?
On Tuesday, June 23rd, 2015, there will be a school committee business meeting at 7 p.m. At the high school.
Thank you. I guess we have a few presentations and one presentation and some recognitions this evening. So, Dr. Auger. So, this presentation is going to relate to the annual Lindsay Ann Burke Memorial Fund poster contest, which Dr. Auger and Dr. Humbird will address.
Good evening, everyone. I'm going to have a couple of people speak to the importance of this organization and this particular award, but first I want to introduce everyone to Catherine Hostetler, who is the runner-up for the annual Lindsay Ann Burke Memorial Fund poster contest. Congratulations. Dr. Humbird?
It's a privilege for me to be here standing next to my friend Ann Burke and her husband for the work that they have been doing. I thought he was up here. For the work that they have been doing over the years in the area of domestic violence and healthy relationships. Through their efforts, they have changed legislation in many states and provided training materials for health teachers. Actually, all staff have been trained at the secondary level in healthy relationships and domestic violence, anti-domestic violence programming. So they have impacted many people's lives, and it's just really wonderful the work that they have done.
Thank you, Dr. Humbird. I appreciate that. We all appreciate that. And we recognize you also for being a very staunch supporter of our organization since the beginning. What Dr. Humbird did not mention is that I taught under her when she was principal at Curtis Corner Middle School. And that's the time, unfortunately, when our daughter Lindsay was killed by an ex-boyfriend, and it was a case of dating violence. And Dr. Humbird was most supportive and has been continually every single year, so she's very well of the work we've done, as you can tell. And we also recognize her for recognizing the importance of educating our youth about dating violence and the fact that it could happen to anyone. With that said, for the past 7 years, we've been running poster contests statewide at both the high school level and the middle school level. And this year, we're here to recognize Katie Hostetler for coming in as runner-up for her poster. And besides giving her a copy of her poster, which maybe you can frame and put in your room, we'd like to also give her a certificate and, more importantly, a check for $250, which we hope will help you as you go to URI next year, and congratulate you for the fine work that you've done. This year's topic was a very difficult topic to depict, and we chose digital dating violence so that it would show how through texting or the use of social media, romantic partners could either stalk, harass, or control you. And I'm just going to read to you what it says there. Katie wrote, someone's text, as if someone's texting you through the phone. Hi, babe, where are you? Answer me. Why aren't you replying? I want to hurt you so badly right now. I'm sorry, babe. I didn't mean it. I love you. And at the bottom, she wrote, this isn't love. This is digital dating abuse. Copy of her poster will be given to every high school in Rhode Island and to other teachers as well in those schools, so that this year and years to come they'll be distributed, so that your poster will be educating thousands of teens across the state, Katie. The educational piece will go far beyond North Kingstown High School and what you began. And we'd also like to recognize her art teacher, Janice Strain, for promoting the contest in her class. She submitted numerous excellent posters, and it's not easy to choose. So Janice, you're to be commended for the work you do and the caring that goes into your classroom work. And we'd also like to give you copies of not just Katie's poster, but our other 2 winning posters as well for your classroom. Thank you so much.
I am so proud of you, Katie, and all of the students who entered into this very important contest. If you can save one life, then that's one life that you're saving. So everyone out there, just just be really aware of what's going on, and just try to respectful of one another, because lives are important and children are, important to parents, and no one wants to lose a child. Thank you very much.
I just want to add one more acknowledgement. This week, our controller, Mr. Steve Janelle, who works as a central part of our business office, received the award of Rhode Island School Business Officer of the Year, a very prestigious award. We are enormously proud of him. Mary, would you like to talk a little bit about what he has accomplished with this?
Yes, Steve is a member of the Rhode Island Association of School Business Officials. He's on their board, and every year they give an award. They're nominated for an award by their peers of someone who excels in the accounting profession and the school profession. And Steve very deservedly should have received this award this year. He really helps guide all of our financial data. He helps keep us all in line for policies and procedures. At the end of FY13, I was up here saying how proud I was that we had a $60 million budget that was audited with not one single management comment. And for those of you that I know, there are some out there that know about accounting, it's really actually kind of an amazing feat, because in a $60 million budget, there's a lot of stuff going every which way. So we are very proud of Steve, and we're very proud to have him as our controller in this district.
So I have a few more acknowledgments to make. The band got a silver and a second in the New York City competition. The jazz band received a gold and second. The percussion received a gold. They went this past weekend. And then let's see, we also have some information on, at the States, on this past Saturday's boys track, Graham Pellegrino came in second in the 300-mile Oh, 300 meters.
300 miles, that's a long way to jump.
I gotta get these glasses fixed. That is 300-meter high hurdles.
And run.
Robert Cassidy came in at States on Saturday for boys track. Let's see here. He came in third in the pole vault, and Richard Kramer came in fifth. Ian Connors second in the 800 meters. The 4x100 relay was sixth. The 4x400 meters was third with Joe Craven, Ian Connors, Vinnie Fella, and Ben Shapiro. And the last one is at the girls' state track, Paige Olausen, I hope I pronounced that correctly, came in second in the javelin. So that was all I had. Is there any other recognitions or acknowledgements? So now we have citizens' comments. Oh, sorry, Bob.
Yeah, I'm sorry, I don't mean to jump in. I just wanted to make a brief comment, if you didn't get to see it, but congratulate the administration and the faculty and everyone who had a hand in putting together the senior week activities and graduation. It was really well done. And obviously, congratulations to our class of 2015 graduates and wishing them well. But I did want to acknowledge the videos online, but it was a really well done. And so congratulations to everyone who had a hand in putting that together. I know it wasn't easy, so well done.
Citizens' comments. So I just want to preface the citizens' comments by saying that I know we have a large crowd this evening, but we do have a 3-minute allotment for each individual that comes up to the podium. And when you do come up, I ask that you please state your name and address, and please try to stay to the 3 minutes. The first is Judy Knobb.
That would be Judy Knapp.
Oh, I'm sorry.
That's okay. And
I guess I really do have to get these glasses fixed.
Yeah, and it's 93 Dodge Street. And I don't have the stamina that Graham Pellegrino has, so I'll be really brief.
Thank you.
So I'm the parent of 2 NKHS graduates. One of my sons graduated in 2013, and the other one just graduated this past Friday night. And I agree with you, Bob. It was a wonderful, wonderful graduation. So kudos to those folks. Both my boys play hockey and have played hockey for a long time. And I and my husband have been fundraising for hockey for 3 years now. In the summer of 2012, I sat at a Booster Club meeting where the superintendent joined us and explained that fundraising for athletics was being allocated, some funds for it was being allocated to a part-time position to raise corporate funding for NKHS arts and sports. And the superintendent went on to explain that there was a similar position like this in East Providence schools, and that it had been very successful. I thought this was great, and I figured we as hockey parents, we knew we had lost funding. We'd need to fundraise for just 1 year until the position had been established. That year, 2012, my husband and I, along with at least one other parent, we took a week's vacation to execute with a number of other parents a fundraising activity that was very successful, and we were able to fund the hockey season for 2012-2013. Well, here we are 3 years later, and the hockey parents are still fundraising, and we've not seen any funds that the athletic budget is yielding from that position, any type of corporate funding for athletics. I think it's time now for the school committee and the school administration to please listen to the parents, the student athletes, and those of us who are voters to take action by restoring funding to all of NKHS athletics. It's my belief, and now I've had 2 sons who have graduated from the high school, that a strong athletic program, along with outstanding academic curriculum, which we have here, and fine arts program, serve as the foundation that teaches important workplace and life skills. We have so much here at NKHS. I just ask, make it complete. by restoring funding to all sports. It's the right thing to do. It's the fair thing to do. Thank you.
Greg Mancini.
Thank you. Greg Mancini, 61 Main Street. Because I thought it could be longer than 3 minutes, I actually sent you a letter yesterday. I have copies of it here. I sent it to yourself and probably everyone here and probably everyone in the town. I thought Judy Knapp made an excellent case for why hockey should be funded, why all the sports should be equally funded. But anyways, I just want to make a couple remarks. In 2012, funding was eliminated, and in my letter I said, or actually I quoted the school committee, and they said it was funded or not funded because of a higher relative cost and low participation. And we sent a rebuttal to that. And outside of one email from Chairwoman, which we thank you for, we really haven't had an explanation. Ms. Clarkin had an email, and she disputed some of our conclusions, and I appreciate that. I thought it was a good faith dialogue that we could start and continue, but kind of fizzled out. To that end, we recognize the challenges you have and the financial hardships you have. And because of that, I spoke on behalf of the parents the last 3 school committee meetings. We went up to the school committee meetings, and we physically went to the joint town council school committee meeting, spoke on in support of your budget, not knowing whether or not there was going to be funding. At the first meeting, we were told by the administration that there was funding for hockey, and that amounted to really to just funding of one coach. So to me, that was not funding. This next year we went and we were told by the administration that that NK offers more sports than any other school district in the state of Rhode Island. And we researched that issue, and that's not true also. There's at least one more school that has more sports than us. There's multiple schools that have the same amount of us. And they are fully funded, you know. This past year, I testified before the school committee, town council joint meeting, and after the meeting, Kerry McKay said to me, "Greg, you didn't mention anything about hockey." And, you know, I got the feeling that he thought I was some crazy parent obsessed with hockey, which maybe some of you do too, I don't know. I must confess I am a crazy parent, but I am not obsessed with hockey. What I'm obsessed with is treating kids fairly. And I wish she was here tonight, but I would refer to Mary Ann Carroll, your lawyer. I think she would attest to the fact that that's what I am about, that's what I fight for, and that's what I fight for as a lawyer. And I think right now you have a group of kids, whether they're student athletes or whatever, that are not being treated the same. So in July, these particular kids have to go to a fundraiser, the Wickford Art Festival, in front of my house instead of being at the beach with their friends. In August, these kids have to participate in a golf fundraiser to raise money while their friends are on vacation. In the school year, these kids have to do 2 more fundraisers in addition to their academics, in addition to their extracurricular activities, in addition to whatever else they're doing, while other students are not doing that stuff. Now, I know that other kids do some fundraising, and I know that, you know, all the sports fundraising, and that's fine. And we want to, you know, we want to do our fair share too, and we get it. But 3 years in a row of fully, you know, of not funding the program. I mean, yes, we appreciate the fact that you did restore a portion of the program. We really sincerely appreciate that. But the fact of the matter is, these kids are being treated differently. And I think one of the reasons why you have a large attendance today is because I think they're sick of being treated differently. I think they're sick of just fundraising and fundraising. And at least that's from what I've heard from these kids, that's what they say. Anyways, I do want to wrap up. I know we've got a short period of time. I apologize if I'm going over. So I sent you the letter for 2 reasons. Number one, so I wouldn't have to bore you reading it today. But the other reason why I sent you the letter was to see if you had any questions. Because what I fear is going to happen is, after I sit down and you don't respond, there may be a new reason. And I want to be able to respond to the reason here now. So if anyone has a response or criticism, maybe I'm wrong with my facts. I don't think I am, or maybe we're wrong with our facts, I should say. I don't think we are, but I'd like to know now, because right now I have an opportunity to rebut anyone's comments and actually create good parliamentary debate. But once I sit down, there's no rebuttal for me. So I welcome any comments anyone has on the podium, if you do. If you don't, I hope we don't hear a new reason or a new rationale later on in the evening. Okay, thank you.
Riley Dom. I'm betting 1,000 tonight.
Riley Dom, 126 Stonegate Drive. Mr. Mancini and Mrs. Knapp, they covered a lot of points, good points, and they were supporting the team as a whole, including the parents, but I'm here to tell the side of the student athletes. And every kid has a dream of playing hockey competitively, like the hockey players, like us. We played throughout our youth, and we put a lot of time and effort into this, so did our parents. And coming into high school, it was a dream to play on the team, and we never expected that we'd have no money towards the team to be funded with. So we came in without knowing that we needed to fundraise throughout the whole summer and the fall leading up to the season. And for the past 3 years, I myself have fundraised several times. There have been 2 golf tournaments I've participated in. I've sold waters at the Wickford Art Festival 3 times and countless hours of leaf raking. But even though we don't receive funding, we try as hard as we can to fund ourselves because we love the sport, and without it, we wouldn't know what to do. And I'm here just to tell everybody how we feel and how important it is to us. And yeah, I just really want to get as much as we can and get the support we need to be successful and have a great season. So, thank you.
Jared Parkins. I hope it wasn't Perkins and I mispronounced it again.
So my name is Jared Parkins. I'm part of the North Kingstown hockey team, and my address is 70 Meadowland Drive.
I'm Anthony Antonucci, part of the North Kingstown hockey team, and my address is 28 Sampan Avenue.
So basically, the only reason we're up here is just to help support the hockey funding reason and to show our dedication and commitment to the sport and to our team. As Democracy Projects, we both did fully funding North Hockey and to show our commitment to the sport and hopefully really get it through, and hopefully we'll get more funding so we can have better success as a team.
If we were to be fully funded, it would be great, but if we can't be fully funded, I think that every single sport should receive a fair amount of percentage towards their budget, an equal amount of percentage for every single sport, instead of singling certain sports out, fully funded certain sports and not funding sports at all.
Allie Lindo.
Hi, I'm Allie Lindo, and my address is 105 Daniel Drive. I'm a junior, and I play for the girls' ice hockey team. I've actually spoken up about this issue on fundraising before, but seeing as it's being discussed again tonight, I figured I'd step up and voice some of my experiences on the girls' ice hockey team. My team is almost entirely self-funded, which means that we must work all year long, both the athletes and the parents, to find new and profitable methods of fundraising. If we do not fundraise, then we simply cannot play the sport, which we all love playing it, so that would be very difficult for us. Our team has been doing very well, and we have made it to the playoffs so far every year that I've been playing on the team. In the past 2 years, we've made it to the championship. We do have only 3 girls from NK playing on the team, but within the next season, we're expecting a lot more participation from NK students. So, as I was saying, it's very strenuous having to fundraise all the time. And I know that the girls' gymnastics team, as well as the boys' hockey team, have similar difficulties and obstacles with this issue. So, seeing that we are a sport, or all 3 of us are sports teams that are offered at the high school, it would be great to have the same equal opportunities as the other sports that are offered. So that's basically what I have to say. So thank you very much.
David DeRusi.
Good evening. My name is David DeRusi. My address is 75 Georgia Avenue. Mrs. Clark, and I am an optometrist. I can help you out.
I don't need to look you up, trust me.
I'll be very brief, as everyone has so eloquently spoken, and I won't reiterate hopefully what they've already said, but I'm speaking on behalf of the gymnastics parents. I just want to give you a brief summary of what it's like to be a gymnast, what it's like to be a gymnastics parent. This is not a sport that you just, decide you're going to pick up when you're in middle school or when you get to high school. Victoria started gymnastics when she was 5 years old, as I'm sure most of the girls on the team have. It takes an extreme amount of time and dedication to excel at this sport. It has an extremely high rate of injury. If you've ever been to a gymnastics meet, you will see girls there that are in casts and brace. It's extremely dangerous. It takes an extreme amount of courage. They could even be seriously paralyzed with their sport. So it really is a testament to their courage that they perform the feats that they do. The girls' gymnastics team practices on average at a minimum of 8 hours a week. Some of the girls practice as many as 20 hours a week. There are a number of girls that are not here tonight because they're at Aim High Academy practicing as we speak. When Victoria decided to go out for gymnastics team in her freshman year, you can imagine our chagrin when the program was completely cut after we, had so hopefully wanted to see her compete at that level. And to their credit, with absolutely no funding in 2012, they won the state championship, which they, did completely on their own with their own self-funding. The next year, I think we got a little bit of partial funding as we did last year, and again, we thank you for that. They repeated as state champions again this year, so congratulations to the girls gymnastics team. 2 out of 3 years they've won the state championship with minimal funding. So as the boys hockey team does, we self-fund. We will continue to self-fund, and as the hockey boys and girls teams, we just ask that everything be equitable and that we be treated fairly, that we get the same respect as the other teams in the town. It's only right. We all pay the same amount of taxes, and we feel our children, are being slightly excluded in this matter, and we just hope that you would find it in your hearts to make it all equitable. Thank you.
I know don't have anyone else signed up on the list, but I just want to make sure that there's no one else that wants to come up to speak. Thank you all. Dr. O'Shea, do you have superintendent's report?
Sure. I didn't really have anything planned, but I would like to address a couple of points made tonight. First, I want to thank all of you for coming out. You know, there's nothing more democratic than a school committee meeting. You know, it's where our town comes together and people voice their opinions about, you know, how we should prioritize our spending and, you know, the resources that we have for the programming in our district. So I applaud you for doing that. You know, I don't know how far we can get with this tonight because it's not an agenda item, but I do want to point out, you know, Mrs. Knabb talked about, and Mr. Mancini in his letter talked about a couple of years ago when we hired a company called Workforce Performance Solutions, namely the person who runs that program is Barbara Jackson. And she and one of her colleagues, Elizabeth Jardine, have worked with us for the last few years. And one of the original goals, you're right, was to see to what extent we could improve on, you know, advertising revenue and that sort of thing to help with sports funding. And that was something that we aggressively tried to do. And we ran into a lot of obstacles that we just did not expect. And the most significant obstacle was actually kind of a positive thing. The more we dug into it, the more we realized that we have so much already in terms of fundraising going on in the North Kingstown community around sports, and, you know, largely due to the Booster Club, which is enormously successful. And, you know, I don't have statistics on these sorts of things, but I'd be willing to bet that we do as aggressive a job in funding sports through that particular organization, through private funds, than just about any district in the state. So we were finding, and we had meetings to discuss this, that we didn't want to start, you know, tapping into the same resources that the Booster Club had already established and compete for the same donors. That doesn't mean that program was not a success. Another, probably a more significant goal was for that program was to help us to grow a career and technical program. Through the work of Ms. Jackson and Ms. Jardine, they have helped us to establish business partnerships with the Quonset community and the larger organization of engineering and manufacturing firms in Rhode Island to have one of the first engineering and robotics academies here in North Kingstown. That has already generated $75,000 in revenue just in grant money that we would not have had if we didn't have those business partnerships. And it also is something, just this very weekend, they put in a lot of time with us to help to apply for Phase 2, which is a business academy that will be a unique, again, a career and technical program that kids from other districts can come into on a tuition basis. And it will make North Kingstown High School a state-of-the-art hub for students who are interested in a business career pathway. And the grant money that we've applied for just this weekend could come in the, you know, in around $250,000 to help that program. So, you know, that money is well spent. And, you know, I hate to, while I feel this question of sports funding is an important one, what I and the committee need to deal with is prioritizing. And, you know, we've had a difficult budget season. As you all know, full-day kindergarten was a program that I and the committee identified as a priority and something that should have been a priority years ago. We have finally addressed it. It was enormously expensive, and it was a big battle with the town council in particular in making sure we ensure the funding. We didn't get all the funding that we needed for that, and we had to cut back on other programming to make it work. And so when I think about, you know, if I had, that's the first question, if we had some extra money, you know, what would we do with it? You know, the first thing that comes to my mind is different teachers and teaching assistants in different places around the district where I feel we're a little on the light side. You know, not that I don't see the sports question as an important one, and I would like to get to that place. I think many people on the stage would like to as well. But it's a matter of if we are able to find the money, where would we allocate that money? And so, you know, I feel like that's something that people need to understand. In terms of the funding, a couple of people mentioned that I don't think you necessarily meant it this way, but I just want to be clear. The hockey team, boys hockey team, does get funded by district funds. In fact, it's the second highest funded sports program in the district other than football. It doesn't get all the funds it needs because it's a very expensive sport, but it does get funded. The issue with the introduction of sports over the years, we don't really ever start at, you know, that level playing field that I think people have called for tonight, that we started with, okay, we're going to establish 20 sports, and we're going to do this all in a uniform way right from the beginning. And perhaps that's a conversation that I know we've had it, and we should have it again. But the way these things occur is that, and this is probably before I got here, I think the girls' co-op team happened after I was here. I think I was assistant superintendent at that point, where the request was, we'd like to have the team and we'd like it sponsored by the district, but we'll be happy to take care of the funding on our own. And after a couple of years, that gets pretty old, as I'm sure you all can attest. And now it becomes, well, we would really like to have as much funding as the other sports. And so it's always a, well, how do we make that work? So it's not that easy a thing. And, you know, I'm not saying that I would never support it or anything like that. It's not the point. The point tonight is I just wanted to clarify some of that context, some of that history that goes into this issue. So I don't know when you want to take it from here, but that's my superintendent's report for tonight. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Auger. Are there any exemptions to the consent agenda? Mr. Blasberg?
I'd like to exempt B7.
Any other exemptions? Mr. Jones?
B5, please.
B5. Ms. McGovern?
B10.
Mr. Jones?
B9, please.
Mrs. Avanzato?
No, they've all been exempted, the ones that I...
Any further exemptions?
Mrs. Clarkin, can you repeat those, please?
Yes. And correct me if I'm wrong. Beef.
He's got one more second,
Oh,
Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones?
D.
D. Okay. So far we have B5, B7, B9, B10, and D.
Thank you.
Is that correct, Mrs. Avanzato?
I was just going to offer a motion to pass the non-exempted consent agenda items.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
One quick point, Ms. Clark. I just wanted to let people know that there may be further discussion of the issue, the sports funding issue, when we get to the budget item, which is pretty early on in the agenda. So just for people that are trying to figure out when they can leave. That'll be early on.
Item B5.
Thank you. I'll make a motion to approve B5.
Second?
I exempted this item. I'd just like Dr. Humbert very briefly to explain exactly what we're spending that money on, and to highlight specifically the extra difficulties we have and the extra burden it puts on us in dealing with at least one of the private schools. Not to put her on the spot, but...
Thank you, Mr. Jones. So the item for everybody, in case you don't have the agenda in front of you, is for the non-public textbooks. And we are required by law, state law, to provide textbooks to the non-public institutions in certain subject areas. And so we do this each year. The item is to encumber funds to be able to fill those orders, because if the schools change curriculum, or if they're using an updated book and they don't have it, obviously, because they're getting it from us, as long as it's on the state-approved list, then we are required to purchase that for students at non-public textbooks. So a few years ago, we changed the process of how people obtained those books, and I think that's what Mr. Jones is referring to. So a few years ago, they used to come to the central office, turn in their old books, and pick up the new books. And we revised that and tried to streamline it, because what was happening is there was a lot of transporting of books to various places. So for our larger schools, our high schools, for instance, Hendricken and Proud and LaSalle, we were able to set up a process, not so much at Proud, and that's what Mr. Jones is referring to, but at the other two schools, we were able to set up a process in which the books were being housed at their school. So the students turn in their books right at their own school. So, for example, LaSalle was very cordial about it. The students turn in their books at LaSalle at the end of the school year, and then their orders are filled by their school and provided to them with books that are ours. So we house our books that we own, NK owns, that are non-public textbooks at their schools. We have had a problem recently. The Proud School has not agreed to do that, and so we are sending our staff there to the school to be able to collect the books. And also during the summertime, the school is not willing to accept those books during the school during summer hours. So we are dealing with a few of those issues, and that's basically the obstacles we're facing.
Thank you, Mrs. Humbert. Mr. Jones?
Yeah, thank you, Dr. Humbert. 2 points. One, I won't belabor because it's not on the agenda and it's a much larger discussion, but the amount of money we spend transporting students to private schools would fully fund sports and fully fund 2 to 3 teaching assistant positions. Second, I would request the administration, given that we are required to do this, and it should be a partnership with the schools that we are supporting in this way, and the students, contact the Proud administration and at least try and dialogue, and at some point say it should not be the intent of the law for us to incur extra costs, an extra burden on our personnel to go take care of something that we are already spending tens of thousands of dollars on to accomplish. So I would also make a comment, if you're, a parent of a Proud student or know someone, please talk to your administration and say, come on, really? We're providing you textbooks. Why are you making it that much more difficult for us to do that? Thank you.
Any further discussion? I have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving B5?
Aye.
B7. Mr. Blaisdell.
At the request of Mrs. King, I've been asked to make a motion to table this item, so just for further review. So make a motion to table item B7.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. B9. Mr. Jones, you exempted B9?
I do. I'd like to make a motion to approve B9 with the amendment that the administration just report back to the committee on the option that is selected as a bonus item that's in the recommended contract.
Second. All those in favor? Any further discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Motion passes. B10. Mrs. McGovern?
Yeah, this item is a concern to me because it was listed as a sole source, but that's because of the way that the spec was written. These are Ford trucks. There are a number of manufacturers that produce bodies for Ford trucks, boxes or flatbeds. Dejana is one, and they happen to be local, but we don't know whether or not we could have gotten a better price had we gone out to bid. Like I said, there are a number of manufacturers that provide these, so I was very surprised to see this proposed as a sole source item.
My response to that would be, first of all, the extent of the damage on these older vehicles is not something that can easily be spec'd. These box trucks were inspected, and our foreman was there and available, and the quotes that were given, this is on 3 box trucks, again with extensive damage, to minimize the cost to the district. This is a Smithfield, Rhode Island company. And we believe that this is the best option for us. There were 2 other recommendations, Mrs. McGovern, that you made of places that we could reach out to. One is in Uxbridge, Mass., and then one I'm seeing is Reading, Pennsylvania. I'm not really entirely sure how I will get my 3 box trucks to Reading, Pennsylvania to be repaired. So the option was chosen as well for the convenience of staff, but a limited staff as well. So I have guys that need to take these box trucks to Smithfield, Rhode Island. They need to be tied up while they're being repaired, and then they need to be brought back. So Smithfield, Rhode Island is closer than Uxbridge. Clearly not, Uxbridge is not that further away, but it is in Rhode Island, and it's clearly much closer than Reading, Pennsylvania. So if this were a $50,000 or $100,000 item, absolutely, we try to spec the best we can, but because of the extent of the damage, where the damage is, it's not as simple as saying we need a replacement of a gas tank or a gas cap.
Well, the company that is located in Reading, Pennsylvania has a local distributor that does the installations for
I was unable to find that on their website. I actually have a printout of their website about their locations. I see Lakeland, Florida. I see Denver, Pennsylvania. I see Morgantown, Pennsylvania. I see Kansas City, Kansas, Georgia, Texas. I see no local vendor for Morgan Truck.
And you said that these are all box trucks, because one of the quotes that you gave us says that it's a platform body.
Yes. They are the ages of the vehicles: a 1999, a 2002, and a 2003. The goal here is to try to extend the life of these vehicles that are still well over 10 years old. What we could be doing is trying to replace them, and quite frankly, it is something that we should be considering. But since we don't have a capital plan or a capital program in this town or in this district, we are trying our best at approximately $6,000 per truck to extend the life further of these vehicles. Our guys take very good care of our stuff. Again, this isn't a lift gate, this is rot damage, and at some point, if this is not taken care of, they're not going to get inspected, and we will have to replace them. I trust that my foreman has worked well with these people, our facility supervisor. I can tell you that our foreman is very knowledgeable in this, and if he felt we were getting ripped off, he would certainly be saying something. And again, if this were $50,000 or $100,000, well, that would be a different story, but I think we need to see the forest through the trees here and not be thinking that staff time is going to be driving to Uxbridge, Massachusetts and all, Connecticut or wherever, for $500, but we're going to be spending money on staff time instead.
But then, again, you can write a spec that says you pick up the vehicle here and bring it back here, and so then you would be comparing apples to apples for the bids had you gone out to bid.
And as indicated, these are not easily spec'd items because of the extent of the damage and all of the damage and rot that are on these trucks. So again, you would also be expending staff time in drafting the bids, spending money on posting the bids, and expending staff time in reviewing the bids and trying to get a proposal or acceptance of a proposal.
I think that's what the taxpayers expect.
Duly noted. Is there any further discussion? Is there a motion to approve B10?
So moved.
All those in favor? Oh, discussion?
Yes, second.
Second? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1.
Discussion on that.
Mr. Jones, you exempted item D?
I did, thank you. I exempted D, well, first of all, I'll make a motion to approve item D.
Second.
I exempted it, even becoming redundant, but to point out that the funding from this comes from, again, that the cafeteria fund, the food service operation has been running a surplus the last few years, so we're able to reinvest the funds instead of, in the past, having to divert general funds to that. So I always take a minute to compliment the administration and Trish Cawley and all the staff who works hard to turn that operation around. And second, I just wanted Dr. Auger or Mr. King to just mention what we're buying so the students know. I think we're expanding their options or something like that.
Oh, yes, we are adding a heating, let me just grab what Trish told me. I know she said a salad bar, that was one thing, and a steam table. And we're very lucky to have this grant. Trish Cawley works very hard in making sure that when there are available grants, we've had grants before on blenders and stuff for smoothies and certain things that Rhode is advocating for. And this is certainly one of them. She has chosen these two items as something that will enhance the food service program at the high school. And we're very excited about it, especially that the matching funds of $2,000 can be funded from the enterprise fund of the cafeteria plan. It's kind of a big deal. We know the last prior years that hadn't been possible.
That's great, thank you. So healthy eating, if you're vegetarian, like I know a few students are, and other stuff. So thank you.
Any further discussion? So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor of approving D?
Aye.
Aye.
Motion passes. Mrs. King, do you have anything to report on the 2014-15 school budget?
No.
We have an agenda item here under the 2015-16 school budget to authorize the spending authority for the month of July. Can I have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Can I, before we second it, I'd like to add a little detail to the motion, if I may. Do you mind if I make a motion in your stead and be specific?
I'll withdraw my motion if I get more specific.
Thank you. I'm going to be, because I want to change what's on here. So what my motion would be to authorize the superintendent during the school committee recess to make decisions regarding time-sensitive expenses for fiscal year 2015 teaching, and this is pretty much what we have typed. Teaching and support staff hired in July, staff hires for summer school, staff hires for sports camps, facilities repairs and related expenses, curriculum supplies, technology, infrastructure and equipment, furniture and equipment, with the stipulation that the expenditures must be time sensitive and that the members of the school committee will receive weekly reports and backup information related to any expenses that are approved pursuant to this authority, and that all expenses must be budgeted or grant funded, and that any expense over $10,000 must be specifically forwarded to the chair or vice chair for specific approval.
Second.
Any discussion? Mrs. McGovern?
I am opposed to this because I think that it's irresponsible for the school committee to give up their responsibility to oversee the expenditures and the budget. There's a smaller group now, there's only 5, so we'd only need to get 3 people together for a meeting in July, and I said I would make myself available, so we just need 2 more people who would do the same thing. I do understand that there's a lot of things that have to happen. All of these things listed are very legitimate potential expenses during that time, but I don't see why we couldn't make ourselves available to do this approval rather than just giving a blanket approval ahead of time.
Mrs. Avanzato?
I think it's clear from the motion and from all the different stipulations that we're placing that we are absolutely not giving up our oversight authority. In fact, this is very limited in terms of the school committee receiving reports, in terms of everything being budgeted, grant funded, over $10,000 going to a member or the leadership of the school committee. So I think we're being cautious, and I think we're practicing oversight, and I am not willing to meet in July, and the school committee has always had the month of July off. A very necessary break a lot of times. And people plan their vacations around that month. Administrators do. Maybe some school committee members also. So I don't think there's any, we've done this previously, and we always get full reports from the administration as to what is being spent and what is being decided. And if we really were to disagree with what was being done, we could address that. So I think this is perfectly responsible.
Dr. Auger?
Sure. To piggyback on Mrs. Avanzato's point, part of the issue is calling a meeting and having the school committee available. The other part is the administration's availability. We have, we don't necessarily always do it this way, but generally speaking, we like to take our vacation time when school is not in session. July is the best month for that. Other things are in motion at that point. School is not. So, as I think all of you know, as soon as one school committee is done, the three of us here on the stage are pretty much busy preparing for the next school committee meeting and things that need to happen. So, and I would hate to have to call together a school committee meeting basically to, replace someone at sports camp. That's not, that major an issue. In years past, people have said, well, technically, the school committee has already approved of these items in their budget. We're just approving, the actual person in the place. But there's nothing that we're asking to do here that hasn't already been approved when you approved of our budget. So I hope, that in itself is a major level of oversight. When we do the approvals as a follow-up, when we approve of personnel, for instance, that really is the second approval of whether it's a hire or a purchase, because the money has already been allocated in the budget decision that you've already made.
And I just want to add one further comment, because it was brought to my attention that there were some issues regarding this. I mean, this has been the way we've consistently done it, but I did speak with Mrs. King because of some concerns, and that's why we made the exception this year to add more limitations by having her give a weekly email update as to what expenses are coming, what she might know if that's coming the following week, and for Mr. Blasbog and I to have to approve anything over $10,000. I also want to reiterate that even though we're off for the month of July, Mr. Blasbog and I are always in constant communication with the administration, so if there is an issue, we're certainly going to make sure that we address it, and if we needed to call an emergency meeting, we certainly would. Any further discussion? Mr. Jones?
Thank you. This has always been a tricky issue, and I remember when John Biscardin was up here, always
never liked
sort of given his pontificating in the way that only he could on this issue. And some things, his point about on sports camps, doing stuff we can as early as we can. I've always made the point, we should be able to easily identify now any students at risk for summer school, and so having a sense of that kind of stuff. I do appreciate Mrs. McGovern's points and Mrs. Avanzano's point. So I appreciate that we're adding the weekly stuff, and I appreciate the chair adding that we retain the flexibility to call a meeting as necessary. I think it's pretty easy to get our schedules and then, obviously communicate with the superintendent and see if there's, windows that are available if that's necessary. I think it's a larger issue that the committee maybe should talk about going forward in terms of our schedule, and I won't belabor it because it's not an agenda item, but maybe relooking at some times where we know we've had meetings that conflict with other events, and we try and deconflict this best we can, but we know June's a busy time, May's a busy time, there's some other busy times. And sometimes where we have a meeting after a long weekend, and there's a lot of stuff, and there's not a lot of time to prepare. So I hope the committee we can look at how July goes, the reports we get, and maybe have a discussion whether it's appropriate to meet in July or not, and maybe have a little more flexibility in when we meet and also where we meet. The committee did have a goal to get out to more schools that we've sort of put on pause. So I appreciate both points of view and the amendments and the changes that the chair and the vice chair have made. Thank you.
Any further discussion? So I believe I have a motion and a second to approve the authorization of spending authority. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. All those opposed?
No.
Motion passes 4-1. Mrs. Avanzato.
Just a quick comment on bidding in general. And I think, you know, having witnessed the bidding going on in the school department for about, I don't know, over 10 years, but on this committee for 7 years, I think our bidding process is pretty impeccable. It has improved beyond measure, but it's pretty impeccable, and I trust our facilities subcommittee, and I trust Mrs. King and she does explain her rationale here very well, week after week, meeting after meeting. To me, it all makes sense, fits in the bidding laws and guidelines, so I just wanted to commend her and mention that.
Thank you, Mrs. Avanzano. I appreciate that.
Is there any further discussion on the 2015-16 school year budget? Mr. Jones?
Yes, thank you. I'd like to reintroduce my tabled motion from the previous meeting, which is to authorize an amount not to exceed $35,000 from any unexpended funds that are currently encumbered for the matching grant for the business and finance CTE to be allocated in the 2016 fiscal year budget for the athletics program.
I'll second that.
Discussion? Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I appreciate all the community members and especially students who come out and speak. It's not easy to get up here even if you have a prepared speech or notes and talk. So I appreciate all the students, especially the students who take the time to do that. I know this has been an ongoing issue, and I appreciate the superintendent's comments. I guess I would say if you go back to 2012, and I remember that meeting because I was in the audience, and it's one of the reasons I ran for school committee, and not because of the specific funding cuts that were made. It was more that the circumstance that the committee and the superintendent and the administration found themselves in, having to deal with a budget shortfall based on our funding from the town and other shortfalls. There was a long list of items, and that list was really incapable of being totally and thoroughly analyzed given the short time frames that our budget process, which I hope we fix in the next charter review to some degree, the committee had to make. And there's some unintended consequences which really, things like the school start times and others, which really, if the committee and the administration had more time, maybe could have vetted more, talked about more, but they were under the deadline to submit the balanced budget, and those were the cuts that needed to be made. But now that we've had a couple years, and we've had a couple examples of where we've had either cuts made in programming or other items that we've thought about and taken some time and stepped back and analyzed. And one example is the language program. You know, we had a language that we were going to cut, and this committee, the previous budget cycle, gave the administration and the high school and the foreign language department a year of funding to thoroughly analyze it, look at the enrollments, look at the future, and come back with a solution to that, to the committee. I know even within the athletics program, when we gave the administration time, and the administration, working with the teachers, came up with a great solution in terms of being able to fund coaching and advisors, all within the existing funding. That's why we were able to fund at least the coaches of some of the sports that had got cut, and ensure that our co-curricular program advisors, the funding for that was able to remain as well. And that was a great effort by the administrations in collaboration with the teachers and their collective bargaining unit. I'd like to afford, we've just empowered today, I think we're going to, and in the budget, to have a full-time athletic director, which is something I think was sorely needed in this district. We have a tremendous individual in that thing. I think we have a great leadership team at the high school and the administration. I think if we give them a year to look at this and come back, my goal would be that we find an equitable way of funding sports fully. And maybe we can't do that, but we will at least come back, the administration, with a recommendation on a very thoughtful way of how to allocate resourcing shortfalls. There's a lot of different options that can be done, and I don't want to sort of pick one or the other, but I think we should, since we have potentially the resources, to give our athletics program a one-year bridge and let our administration come back and say, this is truly a fair and equitable way of determining which sports we provide, and if we provide them, how the funding for those work. So all the coaches and all the student athletes and all the parents know at the start of the season, once the budget's approved, where the shortfalls will be, what their responsibilities will be. I do think that we've had 3 years now of duly unburdening a select group of athletes. And while I do appreciate that we have given hockey, especially the boys hockey, a significant amount of funding, it really still doesn't address the issue of what's fair and equitable in that sense. And I would conclude to say that I agree with the superintendent. We have a lot of priorities, absolutely. And it's always a question of where you spend a marginal dollar. But we have funds that we've allocated towards a one-time grant, and I think that grant is more important. But if we don't end up spending all of it, it was a one-time matching grant funding. It will go to a one-time bridge for this program, and the administration can come back and say how we fix it so it's not a structural issue. And I do think there are other issues that we continue to need to dig deep in over the summer. Maybe in August we'll have to go back to the town council. Maybe we'll find, knock on wood, that some of our efforts to, like Full Day K, has brought students back from charter schools, that the attention that's being put on the inequities that exists with charter school funding and how it incredibly impacts districts like North Kingstown will be addressed by the General Assembly, and we'll find that we have more resourcing in August. But it's unfair, since you heard today, that these parents have to know in the summer whether or not they have to fundraise. And I think we should afford, them and the athletics program this one-time bridge like we did for language, that opportunity. And I have full confidence the administration will come back with either a way of funding or at least a truly fair and equitable way going forward, so in budget season everyone knows the playing field that we'll operate under.
Mrs. Avanzato.
Yes, I agree with a lot of what Bob said. I have a couple of concerns, and I'd like Phil to speak to them, in that I don't know whether this is even possible in terms of if it's realistic there'll be money from this grant, first of all. The one-time bridge idea is a good idea, but I also think it kind of sets us up for if we don't have the money the next year, people will be very dissatisfied and upset. But on the other hand, maybe that just makes us find a way. I don't want to mislead people, but I do need to hear from administration on the likelihood of this funding, what their opinion is of that. I fully realize there are academic necessities that this committee needs to address. One of the things that I don't think I can really, well, I guess I can talk about it on the agenda under budget cuts, but I've been hearing from Davisville Middle School staff and parents that there are some major impacts to the cuts that we've made there, and that needs to be revisited in terms of reading specialists and in terms of the library and its availability to the kids. They've closed the library for half the day. That school really needs, the population there is a needier population than Wickford Middle School, and I have it on really good authority that it is definitely impacting the students. And I've spoken to the principal today. I reached out to her just to confirm that I had my facts right. And obviously that's our mission, is education, but I also realize the value of sports to the education of most of these kids, and in terms of college and in terms of just life skills and everything else. So I'm not trying to say it's not important. I definitely intend and think that this committee needs to go back to the town council if we get into that, because I believe we already are in a position where the cuts that we made are hurting the students. But back on the motion of regarding the one-time funding for sports, I'd like to get the administration's opinion of that. And I apologize that we're kind of springing it on you, but you may have had a sense that it was being talked about.
Sure. Well, you know, I made some points about this earlier. You know, even, first to answer your question about the grant, we just applied for the grant this week. It's a very quick rollover. We've been told we will know one way or another by July 1st. I don't know if that means we will know one way or another by June 23rd, the point of our next school committee meeting, so I don't know if there's an opportunity to make any decision at that point. But we have applied with you know, all of that money in mind, hopefully up to $250,000. We feel we have a very impressive application and a very aggressive program goals and mission. So we feel pretty optimistic about that. We've worked closely with people from Rhode about that. So I don't know one way or another what that would mean. I don't know who else is applying for this money and how it would be allocated from Rhode's end to say, you know, they're going to give a lot of places money but not as much as they've asked for, you know, that kind of thing. So it's hard to say what is available. You know, and again, I definitely feel for this issue. I'm all in favor of what Mr. Jones is putting together. I'm always willing to look more into this program. I know every time that I talk with Mr. Haig about this issue that he does a number of things internally to do that equitable funding thing. He has to explain to a number of coaches about why, you know, they can't do a certain thing this year that they were thinking they would do, or they would need to do that out of their own private, you know, fundraising, probably not as much as the hockey needs to do. But, you know, there's a lot of back and forth from Mr. Haig and the coaches about, you know, how to fund everything that, you know, the students and the coaches would like to have funded. It's a very complicated matter, as you know. It's not just a matter of paying for, you know, registration. There's equipment, there's ice time, there's transportation, there's coaches, there's referees, and all the fees that go with the interscholastic league and so on and so forth. So there's a lot that goes into it. And North Kingstown does a very good job of covering, you know, as much of that, I think, as most districts do. There's probably a couple that do full funding, but, you know, I think we do a pretty excellent job ourselves. So, you know, I don't know what to say. If there's money left over, you know, again, I would go to my priority list right now. That's not at the top of it. You know, I'm deep into conversations with principals and with Dr. Perzullo about, you know, different staffing needs that we have around the district, and we're doing all kinds of wonderful and creative things to make this work without the ideal staffing we would like to have. It's not something that I can bring up at every school committee meeting. I have to pick my times to bring these things up, and perhaps in August might be a time where I have to, you know, look at, okay, we got school in a couple of weeks, and I have particular needs that I didn't know as much about in May and early June. So now I have to come to the school committee, or maybe the school committee has to come to the town council to say, You know, we thought we were looking at one thing, we may need more. That being said, other things could trend in our favor. As Mr. Jones pointed out, you know, now that we have full-day kindergarten, there is an opportunity that we may have fewer students that elect to attend local charter schools. That may mean more tuition that was going out of the district is staying here, and that could trend in our favor. So there's a lot to learn by, you know, August 15th or so. So sorry to give you a non-answer on that, Mrs. Avanzato, but that's the best I know right now. I don't know if Mrs. King would like to add to that at all.
Well, first of all, it occurs to me that Mr. Mancini and his group really do not have an answer one way or the other, whether this motion gets approved or not, because we're not going to know the answer until early July. That's the first part. The second part is that I think I would encourage you to, first, it appears that you understand that this is a one-time funding, as Mr. Jones indicated, because you have not made a sustainable cut to anything at this point to sustain this going forward. And you know that I've spoken to many of you individually that I am big on when you add something, you need to ensure that you can carry forward with it, and that would mean making a sustainable cut. We have not done that at this point. The other part is that there are a real lot of things going on between now and the start of school, and that would be even outside of any of the things that Dr. Auger indicated. You know, I've been here for, this will be my fourth beginning of a budget year. You know, we always have issues in special education for students that move into the district that we didn't know about. You know, charter schools, hopefully, knock on wood, this year won't be an issue, but we're not going to know that again until school starts. Career tech, students make their decisions at the end. So it makes me a little bit nervous that we could have other issues, and we're really not solving anything here. And we really haven't answered a question, because the other side of the coin is, what happens if there is nothing left? What happens if we get the entire $250,000 grant for Rhode and the whole $62.5 gets committed to that grant, as has been at the previous meeting? I'm just not really sure that you've answered all of the questions or everyone's question that happened to be in this room tonight.
Go ahead.
Mr. Blasberg and then Mr. Jones.
Mr. Jones, I commend you for a creative approach to a problem, because sometimes that's what needs to get done. And I applaud you all for coming tonight and advocating for your sport that I know that you truly believe in, and I'm a big supporter of sports. I believe it's an important part of the education that the kids get in the district. And if there is available funding to provide to the hockey team to fund your ice time and other expenses, I would support that. But if we have money left over for this particular grant, there are things that I think that are pressing on the educational side that I would want to look to first. And one of them would be what Mrs. Avanzato said, which is that we had to make some difficult cuts in order to make full-day kindergarten work. Those cuts are having an effect at particularly Davisville Middle School. And if some of the money that is left over, if the money is left over, at that point, that would be something that I would want to look to first before, frankly, you know, sending that money on to a sports program. And I think it's a little premature to be talking about this. I understand that you folks have to do your fundraising. You'd love to know one way or another. I also know that if the week before school came we said, oh, hey, we found all the money, here you go, here's a big check, I don't think you guys would be coming up and yelling at us and saying, oh, no, don't fund hockey, we don't want it anymore. If it turns out that way and we're able to do it later on in the year, when we have hard numbers and we know, you know, then I'd be willing to look at that. So I think it's a little too soon to sort of allocate money that we may or may not even have, and I think that at least a portion of that money, if it were available, would need to go to a more specific educational purpose first. You know, that was one other thing I wanted to add, if I can remember it while I'm speaking. And I don't, so we'll move on, but I'll pass. Thank you. If I remember, I'll.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I appreciate the point, but I guess I would say that putting money to restoring, and we made cuts. We didn't specify where those cuts had to be made. And I would argue that there is, and the superintendent knows this, because he has made the offer to get with the committee members and dig deeper into what's going on, especially at Davisville Middle School. Just remember, the grant is one-time funds, so you're readdressing the same point Mrs. King just made, that unless we address the issue structurally, we're trading one off for the other. I would say that, we have a laundry list of stuff. Yes, absolutely. This is one area, and I appreciate exactly what Mrs. King said, which is why I think if I didn't add it, I think the expectation of the committee is that the administration will come back with a fair and equitable funding formula. I know people say if you provide something, then it will be expected. Well, we provided full funding until 2012, and we took it away. We take things away, we restore things. We suffer through that with the town council and the issues they have. I don't think that the parents, I think they're fully aware that it's a year-to-year thing sometimes with sports and co-curriculars and some other things. I know that we've asked superintendent to come back on co-curriculars with the participation rates, because that may be another area, we're going to look to cut if there's some areas that aren't really getting the full activity of students or have very low participation rates. I guess I would say that I would love to restore the school start times before I did these, but that's a much bigger number. And again, an area that we have to keep addressing. But I would say this is one small area we can potentially fix. I appreciate if it wasn't made clear that yes, that my motion is somewhat contingent on the state's decision on the CTE, and if they fully award us $250,000, well, then my motion really has no meaning, because there won't be any excess funds from the matching grant. But I think this is at least an area that we can address an inequity that's been going on, and not necessarily come back and say, because we're only talking potentially $10,000, $20,000. I would submit to you that if this committee really wanted to, and we really wanted to restore a TA position, or we really wanted to restore something, that we could roll up our sleeves and find $20,000 in July and August, and address the much deeper issues that go behind some of those, that in terms of the academic programming and some things that go on. But this is an inequity we know has been going on for 3 years now, and we really should at least give some kind of hope that there's a fix for.
Mrs. Avanzato?
I'll just try to keep it brief. I really agree with that. And I just want to make it clear, I'm not choosing between funding this, fully funding sports, and restoring some of the things that we know we need to restore from these cuts that we just made. I'm saying we need to do both. And I'm asking the people that are sitting out here in the audience and anybody who's watching this at home to start coming to the meetings, the town council meetings, and support this committee. The town council process was absolutely abysmal this year, in case you don't know. They sat and looked at each department of the town. Not one penny was cut from any of their departments. They're fully funding everything. And then they found $1 million the night of the vote. Or the manager found $1 million that he didn't know was there. And it's just, I've seen it too many times year after year. It's the town council's responsibility to fund these. We've got parents running around fundraising for 2 out of the 3 months of the summer. It's ridiculous. They have the money. It's sitting over there, 12 million of it or something. I just can't see myself voting no again and having everybody run out and fundraise again. If there's any possibility that we might be able to get the money doing this, I say let's do it. And then I think we're going to be knocking on the town council's door regardless, because there are other things we're going to need to restore. And I fully respect Mrs. King's comments about structural deficits. I generally tend to not want to do that. But given what's going on and the way we are trying to pinch every penny and cutting things and having it impact kids, when I don't see that happening on the council side, I can't do that, so, thank you.
Mr. Blasberg, did you?
Nope, I'm all set, thank you.
Mrs. McGovern, did you have any comments?
Not at this time.
So I guess my comments would be, I mean, I echo the sentiments of Mr. Blasberg and Mrs. Avanzato, and I'm certainly not against fully funding sports, but I do think it is a little premature. I would prefer to wait until we find out how the grant funding comes in, we get through August, and we see what kind of obstacles that we may encounter for the beginning of school. While I appreciate that the fact that we're now funding full-day K, we might get some kids back from the charter school to offset some expenses. I don't think for a second that we could go knocking on the town council's door and ask them for more money after what we just went through. I don't see that happening. I will say that Dr. Ajay was correct in that Mr. Haig is very creative with his funding, and in fact, and correct me if I'm wrong, but we were able to fund everything for the hockey team this past year with the exception of ice time, which was to a tune of $12,000. I don't see that amount going down at all, so I think it's a matter of can we come up with that extra money to fund these sports. But I just think that because we're already seeing issues with regard to Davisville and other things, and it's so premature, we just closed the budget, and we don't know what else is coming down, that personally, I appreciate you all coming out, and I think Mrs. Avanzato is correct. You know, keep coming out, keep being vocal, and I do support this, but I just, in good conscience, at this moment tonight, can't just pull the trigger until I know exactly if we're going to get the grant money or not, because I don't want to go down the path to add it and then have to take it away again, because then I think we're really doing everyone a disservice. Any further discussion? Mrs. McGovern?
I think that there does need to be some more study on the whole funding of sports issue, because even if, as the young man suggested, that there would be something equitable, if you know, equitable is in the eyes of the beholder. So, you know, is it the same amount per athlete, which would fully fund some sports and leave some terribly short, or is it 75% of the cost per athlete for every sport, which would be a huge variation in the per athlete cost? So I think a little bit more study would need to be done before we suggest making changes to the funding formula.
And I have to agree with you, Mrs. McGovern. You know, tonight we're approving a full-time athletic director. That's a huge step. We just finished getting a better hold over the coaches and the stipends, and I think this is the next phase to figure out how we equitably fund sports, but I think we just need to do a little more homework first so that we make the correct decision. Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I don't see them as mutually exclusive. You know, it was part of the motion, or at least implied, that we're going to do that anyways. And I recall when we gave the language program a year, we didn't say, well, we're going to cut the language and study it and then come back and decide if we want to restore it again. You know, I would say, yes, I guess we could, but that's essentially what my motion does. It says, let's see how the grant comes, and if there's funding there, up to a certain amount, let's put it towards the athletic program. We can study the other stuff. I failed to see, given what's happened at least last summer, and the funding issues that occurred there, that up to $30,000 or $35,000 is not going to be a life breaker for this, and it will solve one time a major issue that came out of 2012. I wish we were talking about $300,000 to say we were restoring the start times at the high school and trying to solve that, but we're not. But we're talking $30,000, and I'm more than willing to spend the summer or go up to the General Assembly if you are inclined to do so and go support the House and Senate bill that would limit the amount of money that districts have to send to charter schools to their last year's spending, because right there, that's 100,000 plus savings for this district alone that should be reinvested back into our educational programming. But, you know, we can not maybe solve it, but we can at least come up with a plan right now. You know, I think if we keep kicking it down the road, that's what we've done the last couple of years. You know, let's at least give the same consideration to athletics that we gave to the language program.
Any further discussion?
Yes. Do a roll call vote, please.
So we have a motion and a second for Mr. Jones's. Do you want to reiterate what your motion is so it's clear, Mr. Jones? It's $35,000 contingent upon?
Well, an amount, up to, no more than 35,000 of any remaining unencumbered, any remaining funds from the encumbered $62,500 we have put towards the matching grant for the Business and Finance Career CTE to be reallocated in the FY16 budget to the athletic program, contingent upon the administration coming back to the committee with a fair and equitable funding formula for athletics for use in the FY17 budget process.
Mr. Blasbaugh?
Having that reiterated, I just want to make my position clear. I fully support looking at that money, if and when it is available, and looking at allocating it towards sports programs, as well as, even if it creates a structural issue, potential academic programs. But I'm not willing to just give a blanket approval in the way that you just phrased it now until I see what's going to happen.
Mrs. Avanzato?
Well, that's good news. I guess the committee can put it back on an agenda after this vote. So
I'm willing to revisit it, just not.
Can we amend the motion?
Well,
you may not want to.
Mr. Jones would have to withdraw.
No, there could be an
Mr.
amendment.
Jones could amend his.
Or anyone can, but.
Yes, anyone can amend the motion.
Anyone can amend a motion.
We vote on the amendment.
Mr. Jones, do you want to amend your motion?
Oh, I thought Mrs. McGovern did.
Well, Mr. Blasbaugh, so.
You mean to amend my, well, I'm doing what I'm saying. I'm just saying I don't think now's the time to look at it. I think the time to look at it is if and when it happens. And if and when we have that money available, then I'm willing to talk about how we allocate that money. So it's not really an amendment. I just don't support making the decision.
So you're saying it's
Can we table it until?
Except we put ourselves in this situation by not meeting in July.
But Mr. Jones, by August, we'll know whether or not we have the grant.
Well, we'll also know probably by July 1st. So I would put this, under the, the spending authority. I guess my point going is, if you're not willing to commit to it now, that's one point. But we revisit in August.
I think it all hinges upon whether or not we get the grant and what the matching funds are.
How much we have.
Right. So I think if we table it possibly to the first meeting in August, then we're going to know one way or the other.
And my point is, if we have $35,000 to work with, that's one thing. If we get all of the, and tell me if I'm missing something here, but if we only have $5,000 left over, then I'm not willing to give the $5,000 in that way. I mean, it's putting too much of a if without knowing what we have.
I think, I just want to make the comment, I think we're all on the same page that we want to make this happen, but we will have certainty at the first meeting in August. So my personal opinion is that rather than just say no, maybe we're better off tabling it until the first meeting in August, when by then we'll know exactly what we have and what we don't have.
Well, I would say we could table it until the next meeting in June, because we might have more clarity from Rhode. Maybe not, but maybe by then.
We can do that, well, we can do that as well, and then if we don't have that answer by the next meeting in June, then we could move it on into the first meeting in August. I think that's a fair compromise.
I also think that what you mentioned about the spending authority, I mean, given, I don't know if Mrs. King would feel comfortable given the item, and we haven't voted on it, but it seems that there's a majority that has already expressed interest that they would want to look at any extra. We'll have to wait.
It's a bigger issue than just giving Mrs. King that spending authority.
That would exceed
August
the
meeting.
authority we've
Yeah, it
given
would,
in
it
that.
would, yeah, I agree.
That falls into our category.
I agree.
I will withdraw my motion and add a motion that this item be put on the June 22nd agenda.
23rd.
Sorry, thank you. June 23rd, 2015 agenda, and with the superintendent to come back with a more precise dollar figure from his staff in terms of what will fully fund the athletics program for FY16, so we have a little more informed discussion.
Second. I'm going to withdraw my second, also from the previous motion.
So now we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
And to be closed on our new motion, aye.
Aye. Motion passes.
Thank you.
So thank you, but for the record, we do support you in front of the town council.
I almost said that.
That's true. I agree, but I'd love to see 50 of you in front of the town council.
He was here.
He was here, I know.
Don't worry.
But 250. 62.5.
He's put it out there. I think, if you send him a note too and say, I'd like to see principal staff fully explain it.
To make it happen.
And I'll send it to I cleared the house out.
Thanks a lot, Bob. You just care about this.
Exactly. We only need 25% of whatever we get.
Oh, good. Now we get to talk about policies.
Where'd everybody go?
Boy, we cleared the room.
Nice to have you here.
Mr. Jones, can you repeat that motion?
God, no, we can't. She said, can you repeat that motion?
Amy, did you get all that? I was going to ask Bob if he
Hit
had
rewind.
That's what rewind is
That's
for.
why the
It's like a
video
DVR.
Still typing over there.
Ask the court reporter to read that one back.
Mrs. King, do you have anything to report for the CIP existing bond fund future bonds?
No.
So Mr. Jones.
Yes, and it's not a motion, so rest assured. I will report that the language coming out of the RIDE strategic plan in this area is for RIDE in conjunction, I'm not sure with what other agencies, but to encourage LEAs and municipalities to establish definitive capital reserve fund for school facilities, and with the intent to limit the amount of future bonding. So while, again, that's all planning and nice words, at least I would agree that it's nice that RIDE is putting some effort into encouraging the localities to have established capital reserve funds. And things like, capital protection programs, which we have to some extent. But I think that's encouraging language coming out of RIDE.
Mrs. McGovern?
I just wanted to mention that I did have the opportunity to attend the Dialogues in Democracy last night, and really focused my time on the students' projects relating to education. And one of the students presented an argument that while roofs and HVAC and major capital expenses are necessary and very expensive, he wanted to bring to our attention that the handrails in the four corner stairwells of this building have been painted repeatedly. They are rough because the paint comes off irregularly, and he had a proposal to replace them. And it was a pretty well thought out proposal. It was very different than what you'd normally see. There were also a couple of proposals about expanding parking. One was to add a roadway to the junior lot from the lot that really supports the stadium, with parking on one side, and the other was to make the parking rows one way where the students park. And I added that you could change it to angle parking to even squeeze in more cars if it was in fact one way. But the students did a really good job. I didn't get to all of them. I kind of hopped to the students who were unoccupied to speak with them, but we had until 8:15, and I saw as many as I could in that time.
You could spend twice as long, couldn't you?
Yeah.
I felt that way when I gone, yeah.
Thank you for that update, Mrs. McGovern. I think they do have some great ideas, and, you know, maybe in the future, we should be revisiting or talking to some of these students and seeing if we can implement some of their ideas.
Especially if it involves bringing 20 of their friends to stand down those rails and paint them themselves.
That's a very good idea.
That's a money-saving
Mr. Jones?
I would, again, not to put our student rep on the spot, but if she has any input or comments about that, you know, how we can get student input like that. Or not.
We don't want to put you on the spot.
Okay.
You could keep a list of the Dialogue in Democracy projects.
So I just want to make one note with regard to the policies. The foreign exchange student policy is a first read. I know the dual enrollment policy has a first reading annotation next to it, but the foreign exchange student policy is also a first read because our attorney, Mrs. Carroll, has some questions regarding both of those policies. So,
if it would please the committee, I would request that we the first three policies, all having to do with technology and usage, I would ask that we take a vote on those tonight. That is the second read. I understand there have been some amendments to that from Mr. Blasbalg and Dr. Humbert have cleaned up a couple of things, so I think they're ready to go.
Mr. Blasberg?
Oh, make your motion and then I'll.
I will make a motion to approve those three policies, 1, 2, and 3.
Second.
Mr. Blasberg?
So I just wanted to thank Dr. Humbert for giving me the opportunity to take another pass at those, and I apologize again for kind of throwing a wrench in the works at the last meeting. But I think we've gone over it a bit. I know you submitted my comments to the Technology Committee as well, and I think I didn't hear any major complaints, just a little tweak here and there. And so I want to thank you for giving me the opportunity to take another pass at it.
Thank you. So we have a motion and a second. Oh, Mrs. McGovern?
I had a number of comments about this that I just got through, and I wasn't sure how to incorporate my comments into a policy like this. You said it's second read, but I've never seen this before.
They were on the last agenda under policies. That's when Mr. Blasberg wanted to table these because he had comments regarding some particular language in the technology policies.
I don't have a big problem with them. Most of my concerns are relatively minor.
So we have a motion and a second. All those in favor?
Aye. Aye.
And Mrs. McGovern, feel free to reach out to Mrs. Humbred if, with regard to the comments that you do have on the policies, because we do revisit policies from time to time, so it would be good to have your input. Okay. Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I think since we're discussing these policies real quick, not to change them or amend them in any way, but I think it does speak to, and maybe if someone's going to attend the AG open meeting summit that's at the end of July, to me this is an example of where having a shared space, whether it's Google Docs or something, once a document has been introduced, committee members should be able to online edit as long as there's no discussion, no back and forth, no that kind of stuff. But, instead of this trading emails and individually marking up stuff, technology affords us the ability to insert comments or make proposals without, I think, violating the spirit of the Open Meeting Act. And we should really look into a way to do that as long as it's within the legal guidelines.
I actually have an item on my summer agenda to discuss this further with Mr. Booth, and that would also incorporate Mrs. Carroll, so we make sure we aren't violating anything, but I do think there's something we can do.
I also would like to add to that point that, it is difficult with busy schedules for the members of our school committee to conduct, a regular policy committee. It was really kind of a luxury to have Kim Page so available to oversee that as she did. But we are committed to 2 reads for policies, and for this reason, tonight the next 2 policies that I want to talk about are for foreign exchange programming and for dual enrollment. And in both cases, we're on a first read tonight. There's no vote, but there is an opportunity of 2 weeks at this point to get back with ideas after having an initial discussion. So even if you have not been able to, fully digest everything in the policy, you have a chance to discuss it now, and certainly contact me or any member of the administrative team that is pertinent to that person in terms of any amendments that you'd like to see, and we can have it definitely prepared for the second read. And that is part of what Attorney Carroll has identified in terms of both of these programs, the foreign exchange and the dual enrollment. In terms of the foreign exchange program, this is an item that I felt we needed to do some cleaning up. We've had a policy for, and this does not, by the way, refer to what Fraulein Baker does with the German exchange, which is kind of a 2-week to a month-long type of thing. This is a full-year student coming to North Kingstown from out of the country. Generally speaking, North Kingstown has been very liberal in that policy, that as long as there's kind of an accredited program, and we had someone recently come to us who's a representative from North Kingstown who sponsors some of these students and is part of a program that we see as a good, viable program that we would endorse, that we've accepted those students. And, that's at no expense to the sending family, and we need to be a little bit cautious in terms of the availability of space in classrooms for additional students, and we need to be cautious in terms of resources. There have been instances where a student may come to North Kingstown. Again, this is not someone paying tuition. They get involved in coursework. They realize after a little time that they may be terribly homesick, or that they feel they have not made a good decision. And now there's someone who is spending a lot of time with a counselor here at school, whether it's a guidance counselor or a school psychologist, talking about their needs in terms of their emotional needs, and not really focused on schoolwork here, and thinking they may have made the wrong decision. Now, sometimes that happens, sometimes it doesn't, but we've looked around and found that a number of districts are a little tighter in their policy. So this policy basically limits our acceptance to 4 students in the course of a year. We're expecting the students are fully fluent in English. We're expecting that there's no understanding that a student is looking to graduate from North Kingstown High School. We've had issues in regards to that in the past that have gotten a little sticky, both in North Kingstown and when I was involved in another district as well. I remember issues around those kinds of issues. And, clarification about, that they're welcome to participate in, all class activities. And the other issues have to do with, who sponsors a student. We're interested that the people sponsoring the students are North Kingstown residents, or that they are the parent of a student from ascending district, say from Jamestown, or from a parent of a student who may be sending a student for the career in tech, for instance. But in those cases, it would be the responsibility of that sending family or that sending community to tuition the student to North Kingstown High School. So say if it's a Jamestown parent, for instance, electing to have their student sponsor a foreign exchange student, that we will be looking for a tuition payment, just as we have a tuition payment for the student coming from Jamestown. So there's a number of issues involved here, a lot to talk about. I know Attorney Carroll has a few things that she would like to inject, and she's not here tonight. So, we could talk about that a little bit tonight. The other issue is a dual enrollment policy. I think you all know, and many in the community understand, that a number of our students take courses for college credit here at North Kingstown High School, and in some cases attend at local universities. This is a follow-up on a decision by the Board of Regents that was sponsored by Governor Raimondo to have those students' tuitions at state universities fully funded by the state. And Rhode has provided districts with a sample template of enrollment policies that they would expect districts to have in place by the end of June, so that they realize that the timing is a little difficult. Students have already signed up for courses with their intent for next September already, but by having this in place for June, there may be some students that find the ability to take advantage of this programming. So that's where we are with that item. And the language in this basically outlines how a student would have access to state colleges and universities and can obtain college credit even while they are in high school. And it kind of levels the playing field in that it provides this state funding for any student, and not just students who can happen to afford it, as is the conditions right now in a lot of high schools, including North Kingstown.
Mr. Jones?
Thank you. I would agree with the superintendent's points on the foreign exchange. I think there's some important changes and necessary ones he did. I added a couple points. I fully understand we cannot award a diploma to a foreign exchange student, but I see no reason why we cannot recognize their attendance here in the graduation ceremony if they're a senior or equivalent of, and have successfully gone through the year with the senior class and don't have any conduct or other issues notwithstanding. Just because we're not going to hand them a diploma doesn't mean they shouldn't be able to participate in that activity if the administration feels they have otherwise been a student in good standing. The second part on that policy that I requested some more language was, I fully support North Kingstown students earning credit abroad in those experiences. And I just think the language that says reviewing it after the fact, while appropriate, and that has to be done to fully vet and ensure it, there should be language that at least says that we're willing to work with the student beforehand to ensure that as best the high school can determine that the student's course of studies, assuming they successfully complete it, is credit worthy. So we don't have students going abroad doing something, then coming back and submitting it and being surprised that that won't be accepted for credit. So just a couple minor tweaks on that policy. On the dual enrollment, I will, for full disclosure, say that I'm employed by a private university in the state, which in no way right now benefits from North Kingstown students. But while the language in the state template defines higher institutions as public, because that's what the Board of Education controls, the regulations and the supporting policy underneath that fully enables LEAs to establish partnerships with private universities and other accredited institutions. So I do not want this policy to seem limiting, that we cannot establish a multitude of relationships other than with just you or I, which doesn't seem to want to do anyways, but Rick and CCRI, and that we ensure that we match language that's in the existing in RIDE, that we are not limited to just those couple of institutions in terms of thinking about dual and concurrent enrollment opportunities for our students, as well as online accredited providers. I think this is a great policy that is where the state is encouraging folks to go and where education is just heading in terms of providing students flexible and multiple pathways for success. And so I fully support it, but let's not ensure that we're limiting our students. And I would also add that I feel the language in the current policy that says only the program of studies is kind of where this gets captured is not dynamic enough. We should have some kind of mechanism that's frequently updated that continually tells students these opportunities, because one, many institutions have fluid enrollments and course structures that occur not just on a periodic basis, but maybe on a 9-week, 6-week, different kind of basis, and we shouldn't be limiting our students to only snapshot kind of opportunities. They should have the ability, if it meets their needs and is accepted by the high school, to be able to enroll midstream in something if it's available. So I want to ensure that the language is not limiting in terms of how we communicate opportunities to students.
No.
On the policy issue, general policy.
We voted to approve the first three.
Right, yes.
But not this one.
No, these are just reads. I just have a quick question. When's the next policy meeting?
Well, we're sort of mixing it up a little bit. We're not
Okay.
really having official policy meetings.
And then maybe I would request then that we put on the general agenda the attendance policy. I've spoken to a lot of committee members. I will also speak to Dr. Auger and probably also Dr. Pizzullo, and further about what I'm thinking in terms of the attendance policy. I know I've spoken to a couple members on it.
Sure. We can do that in August if you want.
Great. It'll give me a chance to speak to administration before.
Great. Don't try to track them down in July, though. No one's
I won't. Believe me, I'm on vacation in July. I'm going to leave them alone.
Okay. Is there any discussion regarding reports? And I have a motion to recess open session and convene executive session pursuant to RIGL 4246-4.
So moved.
Second. All those in favor? Aye. Motion passes.
What are we doing here?